Welcome to the introduction for the course Implementing Azure Storage. I'm your presenter for this course. My name is Corey Hines. I'm a Microsoft MVP for Cloud and Data Center. Now, in addition to that, I run a company called Learn On Demand Systems where we deploy data center and cloud solutions primarily in the training and education space. Now, I've done a number of things in my career, everything from a database developer on Oracle to an IBM AS400 mainframe administrator up through Windows, NetWare, Linux, and now focus most of my time on cloud technologies such as Azure. This course we're going to cover 5 different areas. We're going to begin with a module on planning Azure storage. Now, in this module, we'll talk about some of the different considerations you want to think about, when you're deciding what type of storage that you want to implement on Azure. Do you, for example, want disks for virtual machines, or is this an application that requires tables and queues? Next, we'll look at virtual machine storage. A large portion of the applications on Azure do run on virtual machines. So what are the different options that you have for storage for virtual machines, and how does that impact things like cost and performance? Next, we'll look at the 2 primary types of storage that are in Azure. The first one is what's known as unstructured storage. Now, this is storage that is designed to hold data such as databases, such as tables. It also includes queue storage. Then we'll look at structured storage. Structured storage is similar to what we find with virtual machines, where we manage things like disks. And then finally, we'll look at how we manage and protect storage, including things like access tokens, role-based access control, storage keys, and things of that nature. So it's a pretty comprehensive course broken up into these 5 modules. So where does storage fit in the grand picture of what makes up Azure? So this is a diagram that gives you a look at all the different pieces of Azure as it sits today. So we have on the far left here security and management. There's an entire suite of technologies within Azure that cover all the different services that are available that govern how you access those services, who can access those services, and the level of permission that they have. And this includes things like, multi-factor authentication, integration with Active Directory. We then have hybrid cloud capabilities here on the far right. Now, when we talk about hybrid cloud, most companies are not 100% cloud-based. They have some notion of on-premises infrastructure, whether it's their own data centers, servers under someone's desk, or a managed data center provider. And in all those cases, they don't want to simply lift and shift to Azure overnight. It's going to be an ongoing integrated process where they need the services and applications that work on premises on their existing hardware to also work in conjunction with new services on Azure. So that's where hybrid cloud technologies come into play. Things like the ability to integrate on-premises Active Directory with Azure Active Directory. Things like Azure Site Recovery that allows Azure to act as a backup site in the event that your on-premises infrastructure goes down. And then also allowing Azure to act as the health monitoring and reporting point for all your infrastructure. Now with Azure, we have 2 major platforms that are available, 2 major categories of services that are available. We have what are known as platform services and what are known as infrastructure services. Platform services represent a platform that you can use to build applications where you don't have to think about the underlying implementation of that particular service. For example, Azure SQL. You can create a SQL Server database in Azure. You don't have to worry about the SQL Server application install, configuration, or management. You simply create your database. That's an example of a platform service. We have things like compute services. For example, Remote App, which is terminal services, remote desktop services. The remote app component of that managed and run by Azure. You also have things like developer services, Visual Studio and Visual Studio Team services, and then various different ways that you can create components of applications, Azure Functions, Logic Apps, Web Apps, and then as well with the newly emerging Internet of Things, things like machine learning and data lake. All represent different services that are available that you can now build solutions on top of. If you're more interested in building infrastructure, which is the focus of this particular course, you have 3 categories of infrastructure. You have compute, storage, and networking. Now, within this course, we'll have modules on, or I should say courses, within this series on both compute storage and as well on networking. So on the compute side, we have virtual machines and containers. For storage, which is the focus of this course, we'll look at blob storage, where we find unstructured storage. We have queue, file, and disk storage. And then we have all the elements that make up the networking stack that allow you to deploy networking infrastructure within Azure. Subnets, gateways, routing, all the things that you're used to doing in your own data centers. And of course, that's available across all 42 regions of Azure, 36 of which are presently online as of, obviously as of today, as of recording this video, which is about midway through November in 2017. So here's a look at the components of Azure Storage. So within Azure Storage, we kind of look at it at a high level. Storage is the building block for everything that makes up Azure. In fact, when Azure was built, storage was the first thing that was built. And it powers all major services within Azure. So at the end of the day, everything on Azure uses the same underlying storage engine. And that storage engine works at hyperscale, over 30 million transactions per second. It's very durable. You don't lose your data. There's multiple levels of redundancy. And the beauty of it is you don't have to think about how the redundancy is configured. It just happens for you. You simply indicate if you want redundancy, the type of redundancy you want, whether it's geographic redundancy, whether it's local redundancy, and Azure does the work for you. It's very secure. You can encrypt your data as it's stored. You can encrypt it when it's transmitted, and you can integrate with what's known as Key Vault so that the encryption keys used are accessible only to you. It's very open based on industry standard libraries and industry standard programming methods. You can manipulate storage using PowerShell, using Linux, using the Azure CLI, or any of the most common programming languages. And finally, you are not limited to Azure Storage as an all or nothing proposition. It can be a component of a much larger storage solution that includes things like private cloud, things like StoreSimple, things like partner solutions that integrate with Azure Storage to give you additional functionality. Now, if we look at Azure Storage and what types of storage are most commonly used. Here on the left-hand side, we have infrastructure components, storage, virtual machines, and networking. The most common storage solutions for infrastructure include disks. Disks are used by virtual machines. These can be spinning disks, hard drive, just traditional hard drives, or they can be SSDs. They can be disks that you manage the configuration of, or they can be disks that are managed by Azure for you. We also have files. Files are, in the simplest form, file shares that reside in Azure. You can map a drive to an Azure file share, or you can integrate it with a file server, so you have kind of a hot-cold solution where the most commonly accessed files reside on the file server, the least commonly accessed files remain in Azure and are loaded on demand. It's a great solution for branch offices. On the platform side, we have blobs, tables, and queues. These are all structures that you can use to build applications. Blobs, or binary large object, is just an open storage model where you can store virtually anything you want within Azure. Tables are simple NoSQL data stores. Okay, so it's not your traditional SQL Server database type structure. It's what's called a NoSQL table. Scales to petabytes of data using a key value lookup mechanism. This is the storage mechanism that's used by Azure internally for the majority of its logging functions. So for example, if you enable logging on a virtual machine, and it's going to create a storage account with a table to store all the logging and analytics data. And then finally, queues. Queues are a simple, lightweight mechanism for asynchronous communication within applications. I can, for example, have an application that posts data to Azure, stores it in a queue, and then have an application running somewhere else that reads that queue from time to time, picks up the data, and then does additional processing, storage, or whatever I want. And we'll see examples of these as we go through the course. Now, all these are built on the exact same unified storage system that covers everything in Azure. So all things in Azure, whether it's something you build or a native component, is built on this exact same core foundational set of technologies. So where is it available? Well, storage is available everywhere. We have currently 36 regions that have storage available, 6 coming soon to get us up to 42, and storage is available in every single one of these regions. Now we mentioned, the fact that it's available everywhere. Not all features of Azure are available in every region. Some of the Azure data centers, for example, don't have the hardware to handle the largest types of virtual machines, or for legal or whatever reason, might not have a certain service available. Storage, however, it's a foundational service available in every single one of the Azure regions.